Avengers: Infinity War came out last weekend and is already shattering box office records.
A must-see event around the world.
2 a.m., 5 a.m., sold-out theaters everywhere.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay?
It's safe to say that when it comes to public opinion, superhero movies have been on a bit of a downward spiral recently. But are they really dying? Whilst many people might tell you that it will never die, that it can never die, the genre is undeniably on a steep decline. So you might find yourself asking, why is that? Well, that's a question that has a few answers, and when analysing why something might be coming to an end, the best place to start is the start. You would be forgiven for assuming that superhero movies only date as far back as around the 80s or 90s, but in reality, superhero films originate as long ago as the Second World War, with the first Batman movie releasing in 1943 and the first Superman following suit only 5 years later. Over the following decades, however, dozens of comic book superhero flicks would burst onto the scene, but it wasn't until the late 90s and the early 2000s that films like X-Men and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man would really start garnering mainstream media attention. Fast forward to 2008 and we would now enter what I like to call the golden age of superhero media. The golden age played host to a plethora of box office hits, including Christopher Nolan's iconic Batman trilogy, the X-Men First Class spin-offs, and Ryan Reynolds donning his iconic Deadpool costume. But let's not ignore the elephant in the room any longer. The main reason why the golden age boomed the way it did was because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and only one man on the planet could kickstart what was to come.
I am Iron Man.
In 2008, Robert Downey Jr. was cast as the illustrious and charismatic Tony Stark in Iron Man, the first installment in the MCU, which would inevitably pave the way for the iconic Avengers movies that we all know and love. Never in the history of cinema has a series of movies captured the hearts and minds of so many people across the world. Never has a year felt as long as it did between Infinity War and Endgame. The MCU was more than just the highest grossing movie franchise of all time, it was a cultural phenomenon. Superhero names that were once whispered in shame across high school lunch tables were now household names in what seemed like the snap of a finger. Love it or hate it, everybody was talking about the MCU. Be it you and your friends debating Team Cap versus Team Iron Man, or whether it was Martin Scorsese comparing the MCU to more of a theme park attraction than a cinema. It is undeniable that between 2008 and 2019, the Marvel Cinematic Universe had the world gripped by the throat, and it seemed like it would never let go. But it's not 2019 anymore. It's 2023, and the state of the superhero genre feels more like a cesspool than a theme park. So what happened? Well, that's a complex question. Remember, we're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar industry here, but for the sake of this video, I believe you can point to two significant reasons as to why the superhero genre might be on its way out. The first of these is oversaturation. The whole genre is pretty bad for this, but Marvel are especially guilty. Back in the golden age, when it seemed like Marvel could do no wrong, they had devised the perfect formula for driving people to the cinema to see each and every one of their movies. And that formula can be summed up in one word: urgency. I know from personal experience that between Iron Man and Endgame, there are at least a few movies that I went to see that I would have otherwise not seen, other than the fact I didn't want to be out of the loop by the time the next Avengers movie was out. The Avengers movies were global phenomena, and nobody wanted to miss out on any information that could be crucial to their understanding of the movie. Imagine going to see Age of Ultron and you've no idea who Tony Stark and Captain America are. It just wouldn't be the same. Now, Marvel knew this sense of urgency existed, and it was driving people to see all of their theatrical releases, but they overestimated its power and they took it for granted.
Remember, with great box office success comes great stupidity.
Between the first Avengers movie and Age of Ultron, there were 4 films released, and between Age of Ultron and Infinity War, there were 7 films released. But here's the kicker. By the time the Avengers The Kang Dynasty is released, there will have been 16 movies between it and Endgame that you're expected to keep up with. And that's not even counting the 13 Disney Plus series that are either released already or coming in 2024, which all have much longer runtimes than your standard 2-hour movie. Marvel have oversaturated their own market, and it's leaving their audience feeling so overwhelmed that they're giving up completely. People don't have time to watch hundreds of hours worth of MCU content just so they can stay in the loop. And because they feel like they aren't in the loop any longer, they're more likely to not see the next Avengers movie when it drops. And as for the diehards that do watch every Marvel movie and every show that releases, they're rewarded, well, with shit. So why have Marvel stabbed themselves in the back like this? Well, that transitions us right into our next answer. Greed. Yep, wherever money's being made, greed will surely follow. Whilst we saw Infinity War and Endgame as pieces of cinematic history, Disney saw dollar signs. Like I alluded to earlier, the rate at which MCU content has been pushed out has increased so dramatically that it could probably win its own Oscar. But more movies does not mean better movies. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Over the last few years, there has been a shift in the status quo. It's now quantity over quality. I can't even pretend that I've been keeping up with Marvel and DC movies over the last couple of years, and why should I? Take the most recent Thor and Doctor Strange movies for example. If two of Marvel's strongest and well-known characters have solo films that just flop, then why should anyone waste their time by taking a chance on shows like She-Hulk? What I'm saying isn't breaking news though. Most people are aware that studios' focus has just been to throw out as many superhero movies as they can get away with. And even though there is a significant downfall in the box office for a lot of these flicks, lots of people are still paying to see them, only to be disappointed afterwards. And atrocious reviews haven't done anything to influence some sort of course correction. People like Bob Iger and David Zaslav don't care about your opinions or your feelings. They only care about your money, which means the only way to make them listen is to not buy tickets to their subpar movies, which in itself poses a bit of a problem for audiences, because how can you really know if a movie is going to be bad if you haven't seen it? So then theatregoers are forced to rely on the opinions of reviewers and influencers. But who can we trust when Tom Cruise was quoted as saying that The Flash was everything you want in a movie and the kind of movie we need now? When I was looking back at the script for this section, I realised that it seemed a little too angry for the tone that I was going for in this video, and I was going to change it. But then I realised that I suppose in a way I am angry. Just like a lot of you are. This genre of movies used to be something extremely special to us, and greedy studio tyrants came along and have been trying their best to ruin that. But all hope is not lost. Like I said, the only way to get their attention is to vote with your money, and it seems like that has started to make a not so insignificant impact. In fact, Bob Iger actually came out on record recently and stated that he was planning on putting more of a focus on quality over quantity and reducing the budgets on new projects, thus reducing risk and freeing up filmmakers to make better movies. Okay, so we can see that through greed, oversaturation, and various other factors that the superhero genre is in trouble. But is it going to die? And perhaps more importantly, can a genre die? The obvious comparison people will point to is the Western. Westerns date as far back as the silent movie era, but became most popular between 1945 and 1965, where for 2 decades Westerns accounted for almost 1 in every 4 movies that studios were producing. Obviously nowadays it's nowhere near that level. So is the Western dead? Well, sort of. I would say that the classic Western is dead. You know the drill. Your sheriff or cowboy, quite often Clint Eastwood, rolls into town, maintains law and order on the frontier by shooting the bad guys down. The classic good versus evil Western is mostly a thing of the past. But that doesn't mean to say that the Western is dead altogether. It's just been innovated on. Take a look at Tarantino's Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight. Granted, Tarantino movies are often identified as Tarantino movies first and whatever else after, but they aren't the only examples. You have Westworld, Yellowstone, and in only a couple of months' time you have Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. My point is, genres don't die, they're just forced to adapt. Bad movies die, good movies live on. And speaking of good movies, there is some hope. It's easy to focus on major flops like The Flash and Secret Invasion because as human beings we have a tendency to shift our focus towards the negative. But we also have a fair amount to be grateful for over the last year or so. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 both received critical acclaim and were massive box office successes. We were also lucky enough to be blessed with The Batman in 2022, and whilst the number of flops heavily outweighs the hits, there is a lesson here. Studios have learned, I hope, that if they make a good superhero movie, we will gladly pay with our time and money to watch it. It doesn't need a $500 million budget. It doesn't need to be a sequel, and you don't need to break into the multiverse so you can drown it in cameos and nostalgia. It just needs to be good. So, are superhero movies dying? On paper, yes. But ironically, I think the death of the superhero movie could be exactly what superhero movies need most. It could and should force studios and writers to realise that it's not the endless pit of profit they thought it once was, and that they need to adapt or die in today's climate. And hey, even if they do die, we can still be grateful to have lived through it.
But a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts. It's a privilege to be among them.